Hey, I'm going to give another another shot. Before that, I do want to say I'm not going to put this up for a few days. I'm making it on Thursday, so it's going to go up in 4 days. So if anybody tags me on this between now and then, I apologize. I didn't see that. This happened to me before a few times. Kevin tagged me on a video that I'd already done, and keep tagging me if you want. Don't if you don't want. But this one is from Robert G. I found it via Steve Donohue's channel. I get it back to Robert G. Reader of Books. Did a great tag, something I'd like to talk about. It's a new channel to me. He's a pretty popular channel, but I'm happy that I was able to discover it through this tag. So anyway, let me get to the prompts. There's 4 prompts for the tag. To read or not to to reread or not to reread is the title of it. Let's give you a quick tour around the Airbnb. My unmade bed, my open doors. It's just another Airbnb. They all start to look the same after a while. I'm still in Durrës, Albania. All right, so there's only 4 prompts, I believe, and they're more like discussion prompts, really. I keep clicking off of him now. I want to make this short as I can. The prompts. I'm going to read them quickly, and then I'll go through the discussion of them. Do you reread fiction? Why or why not? Yes, I do. It's kind of a new habit for me. I am rereading much more now the last couple of years. Maybe since I'm retired, I have more time to do it. That's the why. Do you reread nonfiction? Why or why not? Not too much. I feel like I have a good memory for stuff, so if I'm reading a nonfiction book for its literary quality, I guess, its storytelling quality, I might. I just can't think of many that I've reread. But I have done it on occasion, and I'll go into the reasons why in a minute. So prompt number 3, if you reread fiction, what kind of fiction are you most likely to choose? And there's some examples. I am most likely to choose books that are by writers that are impossible to duplicate, that are writers who, when you get to the end of reading all their books, they're writers that, first of all, you want to read everything they've written, and when you get to the end of it, you're very sad about it. So that would be examples like Nero Wolfe, which I haven't reread any of yet, but I want to do that soon. That was one that Steve mentioned in his video. P.G. Wodehouse, number 1, of course. Number 1 most reread author in my life. The Donald Westlake Parker novels. You know, there's other really spare, dark, gritty, thief gone wrong, wronged thief kind of novels that are almost always imitating Donald Westlake, who wrote the Parker novels under the name Stark, but there's really nothing else like them. So I've read those many times. Really nothing really gives that quite that same hit. You know, much like with the Nero Wolfe novels. Which gives a completely different hit, but there's really, you just wish there was 100 more Nero Wolfe novels. You wish there was 100 more Parker novels. So you got to reread the same ones. Some classics sometimes, although I'm not completely reread in every writer. So here's kind of a problem I have with rereading that stopped me from doing more rereading. For example, I like. Well, I do read, I used to read A Christmas Carol every year. That's fairly short. I'd read that almost every year. Or listen to the audiobook of Patrick Stewart's one-man performance of it. But, for example, if I was going to reread my most favorite Dickens novel, which is probably Great Expectations, although I also like David Copperfield a lot, and I like Hard Times pretty well. You know, if I'm going to pick up Great Expectations again, I start thinking, well, why don't I read Bleak House? Because I've never read that at all. Or why don't I read Little Dorrit, or I probably read, there's probably about 6 or 7 I haven't read, and why would I read one of the ones I like again when I haven't really finished all his books? So that's what stops me with a lot of writers. So obviously in classics I've read, the most rereading I've probably done is Homer. I'll talk about that at the end in prompt 5. And so number 4, if you reread nonfiction, what kind of nonfiction are you most likely to choose? As I said before, I don't really do it very often. It would almost certainly be the few times that I have reread nonfiction has almost certainly been, I lost the prompt page again, philosophy. Nietzsche or something like that, or some different dialogues, Socratic dialogues from Plato, that kind of thing, because or essays by Camus I've read a few times over and over, because they don't really stick in my head that well, especially Nietzsche. It's like I know there's something there appealing to me, or am I forgetting it, or I misunderstand it, because philosophers get, especially in the YouTube era, the social media area, philosophers' work gets appropriated for many, many different agendas, different schemes, and of course, most philosophers, most famous philosophers, well-known philosophers, figure highly in the work of later philosophers. So then you got to go back and read what the first philosopher actually said, and how it's being reinterpreted. But I don't read that much philosophy, so it's just something I do occasionally. I probably should do more, and I also probably will not do more. Okay, so let me find the prompts again. I keep clicking off the video by mistake on my phone here. But I think I'm on number 5. So yeah, number 5. If you've read a book which has been translated from another language, would you reread the same book in a newer or different translation? Almost always. I don't see any reason not to. Sometimes I'll go back to a favorite translation, but mostly I'm thinking of as almost everybody mentions in this prompt, Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. There's always new translations coming out, especially now. Oh, I had to cough. Oh, man. I'm not used to talking much these days, so I get in the coughing fits every time I turn this on. Yes, I don't see a reason to reread the same one unless it's a particularly favorite translation, because for one thing, if you read several different translations of Homer, you get more of a sense. I believe you would get closer to the original intent. Maybe not very much closer, but to see how different people interpret the same passages. And so when new translations of books come out, I use it as an excuse to read it again sometimes. Dostoyevsky, I'm going back out of order here. Dostoyevsky is a person who I've reread extensively because I had not read everything, but I decided to go back and read everything in order. And when it comes to something like that, I'm not really thinking so much about the translator. But if I were going to read the book again and again, I would definitely probably want to try a different translator. Sometimes I hear a translation's particularly bad. This happened to me with Chekhov. The Peaver and I don't remember those translators' names. Those trendy translators now, they're redoing so many Russian books. I read a couple of their Chekhov collections. I thought they weren't very good, and I remembered liking Chekhov in the past. So I'm rereading Chekhov again in older, like Constance Garnett, free Gutenberg versions, because I enjoyed those much better. So that is Peaver and Volonsky, I think her name is. They're a married couple. I don't like their translations. I think they're very flat. They don't really convey the magic of the Russian writers very well, which is maybe I'm getting off track here. So yes, I do try and reread. There are a couple times I've wanted to go back and reread famous English translations of Homer, like Alexander Pope's translations, which were very famous. And there used to be an edition in English, it's probably out of print now, of Tobias Smollett's translation of Don Quixote, which I've read in a different translation, probably Penguin or something like that. I think it was Signet Classics, that one I read. I've only read that once. I aspire to read it in Spanish one day, but I would like to read that Tobias Smollett one just because it was kind of an interesting publishing event to bring out a classic translation by a classic English novelist of a classic from his time. I don't know if I would consider that the best translation, though. We kind of do have a bias, I think, when it comes to new translations, as them being naturally better for the modern reader. I don't know if that's true or not, but I haven't really thought about it enough to blather on about it anymore. Anyway, I think that's about it. How many times would you reread the same book? Well, probably if it's The Code of the Woosters, it's probably going to be an infinite number of times. The Code of the Woosters by P.G. Wodehouse. I don't see how I would ever get tired of that book. It's just a pure joy every single time. When I was young, I read Hamlet all the time. Just read it thousands and thousands of times. I really liked it. There are a few other Shakespeare comedies I'll read again and again. Much Ado About Nothing is one of my favorites these days. Twelfth Night. I tend towards the comedies these days. Henry IV, parts 1 and 2, because of the Falstaff stuff. Those I'll probably keep rereading. I want to reread. This is another one Steve Donahue mentioned, the Ross MacDonald, Lou Archer novels. I reread a few of them last year, then got sidetracked for other things. I really want to go through those again. I think they're just brilliant. I think he's one of the greatest 20th century American writers in any genre. So I'm a big champion of Ross MacDonald, especially his Lou Archer books, especially the later ones when he started out kind of conscious imitation of Raymond Chandler, to have a similar kind of Private Eye series to make money under a pen name. The pen name ended up overtaking his straight career. Kenneth Millar was his name. His wife, Margaret Millar, also a fantastic mystery writer. So they're quite a pair. I'm very obsessed with their books, but in the latter 2/3 of the series, after the first 6 or 7 books that Ross MacDonald wrote about Lou Archer, they really take a shift into a new territory. Like, he kind of finds his own voice with it, and they're no longer just Raymond Chandler knockoffs, even though the Chandler knockoffs are pretty good. That brings into mind another writer I'm always reading, not Chandler, but Hammett. I tend to reread something by Hammett almost every year. One of his novels or a bunch of his short stories. I do read tons and tons of short stories over and over again when I encounter them in different anthologies. Okay, so number 7 is, what's the most recent book you've reread? And this ties into the short story thing. There's a book called Science Fiction 101 by Robert Silverberg, which I'm reading now. It's edited by Robert Silverberg. It's a collection of his it's a collection of classic science fiction stories that influenced him. And I've read almost all the stories in that book before. I'm not quite done with it, but there's probably only 2 or 3 I haven't read. But I'm counting it as having reread it because 90% of the material in the book I have reread before in different anthologies. When you read a lot of old science fiction anthologies, they often come back to the same stories. There's just only a certain number of classics that are taught over and over again, and so I'll never hesitate to reread a story if I like the story. If I come across a story in an anthology that I've read before, I just take the opportunity to read it again. If it's a story I remember not liking, then I'll skip it. But anyway, that's it. That's basically all I have to say. I'm not going to tag anybody because I feel like by the time I tag people with this since I'm not putting it up for a few days. Everybody will have been tagged, or looks like a lot of people were tagged on the original video anyway, but I will put a link, of course, to Robert G's original tag, and definitely do it if you want. I'd be interested to see your answers. Thanks again, BookTube.